prenup was ironclad, the evidence was fabricated, and the husband, Arthur Pendleton, was already celebrating with champagne before the judge had even banged the gavel. He looked across the aisle at his wife, Vivian, a woman wearing a 3-year-old coat and cheap, scuffed heels, and saw nothing but a discarded stepping stone. He thought her silence was defeat. He thought her trembling hands were fear. He was wrong. In exactly 45 minutes, the double doors of courtroom 4B would swing open, and Arthur would realize that the woman he was trying to destroy didn't just have a lawyer. She had an empire. Arthur Pendleton adjusted the cuffs of his bespoke Italian suit, catching his reflection in the pristine glass of the law firm's conference room. He liked what he saw. At 34, he was the rising star of Seattle's tech real estate boom, a man who could sell sand in the desert. But his most successful sale, he often mused, had been convinced the shy, penniless barista he'd met 4 years ago that he was her Prince Charming. "Sign here, and here," his lawyer, Clifford Pendergast, said, sliding a thick document across the mahogany table. Pendergast was a shark in a pinstripe suit, a man who charged $600 an hour to ruin lives. "This finalizes the petition. We're citing irreconcilable differences, but the affidavit regarding her financial incompetence will ensure you keep the house, the cars, and the portfolio. She gets to keep her maiden name." Arthur chuckled, uncapping his fountain pen. "She doesn't have much of a name to keep. Vivian Miller, it sounds like someone who works at a library." "And the other matter?" Pendergast asked, arching a grey eyebrow. Arthur glanced at his phone. A text from Jessica popped up. "Did you crush her yet?" "Dinner at Le Bernardin tonight to celebrate." "Jessica is impatient," Arthur smiled, signing the papers with a flourish. "Vivian has no idea about her. She has no idea about anything, really. She spends her days volunteering at that animal shelter and knitting. God, Clifford, it's like living with a ghost. A broke, boring ghost. I need a woman who matches my stature." Vivian Miller, soon to be ex-Mrs. Pendleton, was currently 3 miles away, standing in the checkout line of a budget grocery store. She counted out the exact change for a carton of eggs and a bag of spinach. Her coat, a beige trench she'd bought at a thrift store before the wedding, was fraying at the hem. The cashier, a kindly older woman named Martha, looked at her sympathetically. "You all right, honey? You look a bit pale today." "I'm fine, Martha," Vivian said, her voice soft, barely rising above the hum of the refrigerator units. "Just a long week." It had been a long 4 years. Vivian had met Arthur when she was 22, seemingly drifting through life with no connections and no money. He had swept her off her feet, not with love, but with security. He offered a roof, food, and stability. In exchange, she gave him her total devotion. She cooked, she cleaned, she hosted his dinner parties where his colleagues looked down their noses at her simple dress. She played the role of the grateful, powerless wife perfectly. But the dynamic had shifted 6 months ago. Arthur had stopped coming home for dinner. The credit card he gave her for household expenses was frequently declined. He started criticizing her appearance, her quietness, her lack of ambition. Vivian unlocked the door to their cold, modern townhouse in the suburbs. It was filled with furniture Arthur had picked out. Sharp angles, glass, leather. Nothing comfortable. Nothing that felt like a home. She walked to the kitchen island and saw the large manila envelope sitting there. It wasn't mailed. It had been left by a courier. Petition for dissolution of marriage. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She had known this was coming the moment she smelled Chanel No. 5 on Arthur's collar, a scent she certainly couldn't afford. She sat on the uncomfortable bar stool and read through the documents. The cruelty was breathtaking. Arthur wasn't just leaving her, he was erasing her. He claimed she had contributed nothing to the marriage. He claimed she was financially irresponsible. He was demanding she vacate the property within 30 days with zero alimony. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Arthur. "Lawyer served the papers. Don't make this difficult, Viv. You can't afford a fight. Just sign and go back to wherever you came from." "Wailimore." Vivian stared at the screen. Her hand didn't shake. The fear Arthur expected, the panic of a woman about to be destitute, didn't come. Instead, a strange, cold calm settled over her. She stood up, walked to the expensive coffee machine Arthur loved, and poured the rest of the coffee down the sink. Then she went to the closet in the guest room, reached to the very back, and pulled out a small, battered flip phone she hadn't turned on in 5 years. She pressed the power button. The screen flickered to life. She dialed a number from memory. It rang once, twice. "Oui." A sharp, authoritative voice answered, a voice that sounded like old money and steel. "Grandmère," Vivian said, her voice shifting. Gone was the timid whisper of the housewife. In its place was a crisp, educated tone, polished by Swiss boarding schools. "It's Genevieve. The experiment is over." He filed. There was a pause on the other end, followed by a sigh that sounded like a gust of wind through a heavy velvet curtain. "Finally. I told your father that playing pauper would only attract wolves. Are you ready to come home?" "Not yet," Vivian, Genevieve, said, her eyes narrowing as she looked at the divorce papers. "First, I have a court date, and I'm going to need the team." The weeks leading up to the trial were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Arthur and Pendergast didn't just want a divorce, they wanted a total victory. They wanted to ensure Vivian was too broken to ever speak up about Arthur's shady business dealings or his infidelity. Arthur moved Jessica into the townhouse 3 days after serving the papers. He claimed it was his right to move on. Vivian was relegated to the guest room, forced to listen to Jessica's high-pitched laughter echoing through the halls. Jessica was everything Vivian wasn't, loud, branded, and vicious. "You're still here?" Jessica sneered one morning, catching Vivian making tea. Jessica was wearing Vivian's silk robe, a gift from Arthur on their first anniversary. "Arthur says you're dragging your feet. It's pathetic, really. Trying to cling to a man who's clearly out of your league." Vivian slowly stirred her tea. "The hearing is in 2 days, Jessica. You can have the robe. It's polyester anyway." Jessica flushed red. "It's silk. Arthur bought it at... He bought it at an outlet mall in 2022, Vivian said calmly. "Check the tag." Jessica ripped the robe off her shoulder to check the tag. Vivian walked away before Jessica could scream. In the high-rise office of Clifford Pendergast, Arthur was pacing. "She hasn't hired a lawyer yet, Clifford. I checked the docket. No notice of representation. She's going to represent herself." Pendergast laughed, leaning back in his leather chair. "Pro se. Against me. Arthur, this is going to be a slaughter. I'll object to her opening statement before she finishes a sentence. We'll have her crying in the hallway by recess." "I want to make sure the judge knows she's unstable," Arthur said, his eyes cold. "Can we bring up that time she lost her job at the cafe?" "We can paint whatever picture we want," Pendergast assured him. "Judge Solano is presiding. He hates time wasters. If she shows up without counsel, mumbling about her feelings, he'll grant our motion for summary judgment immediately. You'll walk out of there with the house, the accounts, and the car. She'll be lucky if he doesn't make her pay my legal fees." Arthur smiled. "Good. I want her to understand that she is nothing without me." On the morning of the trial, rain battered the windows of the King County Courthouse. It was a gloomy, gray day. perfect for a funeral or a divorce. Arthur arrived in a chauffeured black SUV. He stepped out under a large umbrella held by a driver, looking every inch the aggrieved, successful husband. Jessica was on his arm, wearing a somber navy dress that cost more than a Honda Civic, trying to look like a supportive partner rather than the mistress. They walked into the lobby, their heels clicking loudly on the marble. "There she is," Jessica whispered, nudging Arthur. Vivian was sitting on a wooden bench near the security checkpoint. She was alone. She wore a simple black suit that looked old-fashioned, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. She held a single thin folder in her lap. No briefcase, no entourage, no lawyer. Arthur felt a pang of pity, quickly replaced by disgust. "She looks like a governess," he muttered. He walked up to her, looming over her seated figure. "Vivian." She looked up. Her eyes were clear, devoid of the redness or puffiness he expected. "Arthur." "It's not too late to sign the settlement in the hallway," he said, dropping his voice to a whisper. "Spare yourself the embarrassment. Pendergast is going to tear you apart in there. Judge Solano doesn't have patience for charity cases." Vivian stood up. She was shorter than him, but for a split second, Arthur felt like he was the one looking up. "I don't want a settlement, Arthur," she said quietly. "I want the truth." Arthur scoffed. "The truth is you're a leech who got lucky for 4 years. Now your luck has run out." "Mr. Pendleton," Pendergast barked, waving from the courtroom doors. "Let's go. Don't fraternize with the opposition." Arthur gave Vivian one last sneer and walked into the courtroom. Inside, the atmosphere was stifling. The gallery was mostly empty, save for a few of Arthur's character witnesses, business associates he had bribed with promises of future deals. They smirked as Vivian walked in alone and took her seat at the defendant's table. The bailiff announced, "All rise." The Honorable Judge Solano presiding. Judge Solano was a heavy-set man with a reputation for being harsh on unprepared litigants. He sat down, adjusted his glasses, and looked at the docket. "Case number 49201, Pendleton versus Pendleton," Solano grunted. "Petitioner is present with counsel." "Clifford Pendergast for the petitioner, Your Honor," the lawyer boomed, standing up confidently. "And the respondent?" Solano looked over his glasses at Vivian, who sat alone at the massive table. "Ms. Pendleton, are you representing yourself?" Vivian stood up. "Actually, Your Honor, my counsel has been delayed by the weather. They should be arriving any moment." Pendergast audibly sighed, rolling his eyes at Arthur. He stood up. "Objection, Your Honor. This is a delay tactic. The respondent has had months to secure counsel. To claim they are late on the day of the trial is disrespectful to this court. We move to proceed immediately." Judge Solano frowned at Vivian. "Ms. Pendleton, court starts at 9 a.m. sharp. If your lawyer isn't here, that is your problem. We are proceeding." "But, Your Honor," Vivian started. "Sit down, Ms. Pendleton," Solano snapped. "Mr. Pendergast, your opening statement." Arthur smirked. It was happening exactly as they planned. She was being steamrolled. Pendergast buttoned his jacket and strode to the center of the room. He didn't look at Vivian. He looked at the judge. "Your Honor, this is a simple case. We have a successful man, Mr. Pendleton, who made the mistake of marrying a woman who refused to contribute to their life together. She brought no assets to the marriage, she has generated no income, and now she seeks to lay claim to a fortune she did not earn. We will prove that Vivian Pendleton is not only financially dependent by choice, but has engaged in fraudulent behavior regarding household finances." As Pendergast droned on, weaving a tapestry of lies about Vivian's incompetence, Vivian sat perfectly still. She wasn't taking notes. She wasn't crying. She was watching the double doors at the back of the room. Arthur leaned over to Jessica and whispered, "She's frozen. She doesn't know what to do." Pendergast was building to a crescendo. "In conclusion, Your Honor, we ask that the prenuptial agreement be upheld in full and that the respondent be granted 0 spousal support." "Thank you, Mr. Pendergast," Judge Solano said, turning to Vivian. "Ms. Pendleton, since your phantom lawyer is not here, you may make an opening statement. Make it brief." Vivian stood up. She took a deep breath. She looked at Arthur, then at Pendergast, and finally at the judge. "I have no opening statement at this time, Your Honor," she said. Arthur nearly laughed out loud. She was giving up. "However," Vivian continued, her voice gaining a sudden, sharp resonance, "I would like to request a 5-minute recess. My counsel has just texted me. They are in the elevator." "Enough!" Pendergast slammed his hand on the table. "Your Honor, this is a farce. There is no counsel." "I agree," Judge Solano said, reaching for his gavel. "Motion de..." Boom! The double doors at the back of the courtroom didn't just open. They were thrown open with force. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Every head in the room turned. Arthur turned around, expecting to see a security guard, or maybe a confused delivery person. Instead, 3 men in identical charcoal grey suits walked in. They moved with a synchronized, predatory grace. They weren't local lawyers. They carried leather briefcases that looked older than the courthouse itself. Behind them walked a woman. She was elderly, perhaps in her 80s, but she walked with a silver-tipped cane that tapped rhythmically against the floor. She wore a suit of white tweed and a hat with a small veil. She dripped with an aura of terrifying authority. But it was the man walking beside her who made Clifford Pendergast's face drain of all color. He was a tall man with silver hair and a scar running down his jawline. He wasn't carrying a briefcase. He was just walking, his hands clasped behind his back. Pendergast gasped, a sound that was audible in the silent room. "Oh my God." Arthur looked at his lawyer. "Who is that? Who are they?" Pendergast whispered, his voice trembling. "That's Sir Julian Sterling. Wait, no, that's not his name. That is Alistair Calloway, the barrister, from London. He doesn't take divorce cases. He handles international treaties and royalty." The group marched down the center aisle, ignoring the bailiff who had started to step forward, but froze under the elderly woman's glare. They stopped at the defense table. The 3 men in suits immediately began unpacking stacks of files, setting up laptops and pouring water. Alistair Calloway turned to the bench and bowed slightly, a gesture of old-world courtliness that made Judge Solano sit up straighter. "Apologies for the interruption, Your Honor," Calloway said. His voice was rich, deep, and carried a British accent that commanded instant respect. Traffic from the airfield was dreadful. Alistair Calloway, entering an appearance on behalf of the respondent. He turned to Vivian. He didn't shake her hand. He bowed low. "Lady Genevieve," he said softly. "Your grandmother sends her regards." Arthur's brain short-circuited. "Lady? Genevieve? Who is this?" Judge Solano asked, though his tone was far more respectful than before. "I am the lead counsel for the House of Harrington Beaufort," Calloway announced, his voice ringing off the walls, "and we are here to ensure that Mr. Pendleton does not walk away with a single penny that belongs to my client." Arthur stood up, panic rising. "Her name is Vivian Miller. She's a barista." The elderly woman in the white suit stepped forward. She looked at Arthur with the expression one might use when looking at a cockroach on a dinner plate. "Her name," the old woman said, her voice like cracking ice. is Genevieve Marie Claire Harrington Beaufort. She is the sole heiress to the Harrington banking dynasty of Geneva, and you, little man, have just made the biggest mistake of your life." The silence in courtroom 4B was no longer empty. It was heavy, suffocating, and tasted of ozone. It was the air pressure dropping before a tornado touches down. Arthur Pendleton stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from water. He looked at Vivian. No, Genevieve. She hadn't moved. She hadn't smirked. She simply sat there, her posture correcting itself from the slump of a beaten housewife to the rigid, elegant spine of a woman who had been balanced books on her head since she was 4. "Order!" Judge Solano banged his gavel, shattering the trance. "I will have order in my court. Mr. Pendergast, sit down before I hold you in contempt. And you," he pointed the gavel at the silver-haired lawyer, Mr. Calloway. "Explain this. Now, who is Genevieve Harrington Beaufort? The respondent listed on the docket is Vivian Miller." Calloway stepped forward. He didn't walk. He glided. He placed a single sheet of heavy, cream-colored paper on the judge's bench. "Vivian Miller is a legal alias, Your Honor," Calloway explained smoothly. "Fully documented and registered with the Department of State, primarily for security purposes. My client is the granddaughter of Beatrice Harrington Beaufort, the matriarch of the Swiss banking consortium that, coincidentally, underwrites the municipal bonds for this very city." Judge Solano looked down at the paper, then up at the elderly woman in the white suit. "Beatrice." She offered him a curt nod. The judge swallowed hard. He suddenly looked very aware of the scuff marks on his bench. "This is ridiculous," Arthur finally found his voice. It cracked, high and desperate. He pointed a shaking finger at his wife. "She's a barista. I met her at the Roasted Bean on 4th Avenue. She spilled a latte on me. She doesn't have a dynasty. She has a collection of thrift store sweaters and a rescue cat." Beatrice Harrington Beaufort turned her head slowly. Her eyes were the same shade of icy blue as Vivian's. "We own the Roasted Bean chain, you fool." It was her gap-year project. She wanted to understand the common experience. Unfortunately, she took the experiment too far and brought home a stray dog. She paused, looking Arthur up and down. I see now that the dog would have been a better conversationalist. Arthur turned to his lawyer, Pendergast. "Clifford, do something. Object. This is perjury, impersonation." But Clifford Pendergast was not objecting. Clifford Pendergast was currently trying to make himself invisible. He knew who the Harrington Beauforts were. They weren't just rich. They were the kind of people who had private numbers for prime ministers. Pendergast looked at the files Calloway's team was stacking on the defense table, stacks that were growing higher and higher. "Mr. Pendleton," Pendergast whispered, tugging on Arthur's sleeve. "Sit down. Shut up." "No!" Arthur yanked his arm away. "I'm not going to be intimidated by some hired actors. Vivian is trying to pull a fast one. Look at her. She's wearing a $20 suit." Vivian finally spoke. She didn't stand up. She just leaned into the microphone. "Arthur," she said. Her voice was no longer the soft, apologetic tone he was used to. It was bored. "The suit is vintage Chanel, 1954 collection. My grandmother bought it in Paris. It's worth more than your car." Jessica, sitting in the gallery, let out a small, strangled squeak. She shrank back into the wooden bench, suddenly realizing that her navy dress from the mall was not the armor she thought it was. "Your Honor," Calloway continued, ignoring Arthur's outburst, "we are not here to dispute the dissolution of the marriage. Lady Genevieve is quite eager to be rid of Mr. Pendleton. We are here, however, to dispute the distribution of assets. Mr. Pendleton's petition claims my client is destitute and contributed nothing to the household. He is demanding she leave with nothing." Calloway smiled. It was a terrifying expression. It was the smile of a wolf that had cornered a rabbit. We intend to prove that not only did my client contribute, but she is, in fact, the sole reason Mr. Pendleton has a career, a home, or the shirt on his back. Arthur laughed. It was a manic, jagged sound. Me? You think she made me? I built Pendleton Real Estate from the ground up. I worked 18-hour days. I closed the deals. She was at home knitting. We shall see, Calloway said. Your Honor, we move to admit Defense Exhibit A through Z into evidence. The team of grey-suited lawyers began handing out binders. Thick, heavy binders. They landed on the plaintiff's table with a heavy thud. Arthur opened the first binder. His eyes widened. It wasn't legal jargon. It was bank transfers, emails, shell company registrations. What is this? Arthur whispered. That, Vivian said, meeting his eyes for the first time with a look of pure, unadulterated pity, is the receipt, Arthur. You didn't think I'd marry a man without vetting him first, did you? Or that my family would let me marry a man without insurance? You signed the prenup, Arthur shouted, waving the document Pendergast had prepared. It says what's mine is mine, and what's yours is yours. You get nothing. Calloway chuckled softly. Oh, we are very fond of that prenuptial agreement, Mr. Pendleton. In fact, we intend to enforce it to the letter. What is yours is yours. What is hers is hers. The problem, Mr. Pendleton, is that you seem to be confused about what exactly is yours. Arthur looked at Pendergast. What does he mean? Pendergast was flipping through the binder, sweat beading on his forehead. Arthur, the lawyer hissed. Who is Blue Heron Holdings? They're my angel investor, Arthur said, confused. They provided the seed capital for the firm in 2021. Why? And Summit Capital? The firm that bailed you out when the market crashed last year? Another venture capital group. What does this have to do with Vivian? Pendergast closed his eyes, defeated. Arthur, look at page 4. Arthur looked. There, in black and white, was the corporate structure of Blue Heron Holdings. Parent company, HB Global Trust. Beneficiary, Genevieve Marie Claire, Harrington Beaufort. Arthur felt the room spin. No, he whispered. That's impossible. You didn't build an empire, Arthur, Vivian said softly. I bought you one, because I wanted you to feel important. I wanted you to feel like the man you pretended to be. But since you want to claim I contributed nothing, she shrugged. I'm calling in the loans. The lunch recess was a chaotic affair. Arthur didn't eat. He paced the small conference room Pendergast had reserved, hyperventilating. Jessica had fled the moment the bailiff called recess, claiming she had a migraine. But Arthur knew she was likely packing her bags. Rats were always the first to sense the ship sinking. They can't do this, Arthur pleaded, gripping Pendergast's shoulders. Clifford, tell me they can't do this. It's a conflict of interest. Entrapment. Something. Pendergast shook him off, pouring himself a glass of water with a trembling hand. It's not entrapment, Arthur. It's capitalism. You took money from an LLC without checking who owned it. You signed loan agreements. I checked the terms during the break. They are callable on demand. If the lender decides they want the money back, you have 48 hours to pay. How much? Arthur asked. $12 million, Pendergast said flatly. Plus interest. Do you have $12 million liquid? Arthur sank into a chair. I have. Maybe 400,000 in the operating account. The rest is tied up in properties. Properties that are leveraged against those loans, Pendergast pointed out, which means they can foreclose. Arthur, they don't just want the house. They own your business. They own the building your office is in. They probably own the lease on your car." "She played me," Arthur muttered, staring at the wall. The image of Vivian, quiet, submissive Vivian, suddenly morphed into something monstrous in his mind. She sat there for 4 years, acting like she didn't know how to balance a checkbook, while she owned the bank. "You underestimated her," Pendergast said, stuffing papers into his briefcase. "And you insulted her family. The Harrington Beauforts are known for 2 things: privacy and vengeance. You stripped her of her privacy by dragging her into a public divorce court. Now they're taking the vengeance." Back in the courtroom, the dynamic had shifted entirely. The gallery was filling up. Word had spread through the courthouse that something insane was happening in 4B. Clerks, other lawyers, and even a few reporters were squeezing into the back rows. Vivian sat relaxed, chatting quietly with her grandmother. When Arthur entered, she didn't even look up. Judge Solano banged the gavel. "We are back on the record. Mr. Calloway, you were explaining the financial entanglements." "Yes, Your Honor," Calloway said, standing up. He looked refreshed, energized. "We have established that Mr. Pendleton's initial capital came from my client's trust. However, we must also address the matter of marital waste and fraud." Calloway walked over to the witness stand. "I call Mr. Arthur Pendleton to the stand." Arthur walked up, his legs feeling like lead. He swore the oath, his voice barely a whisper. "Mr. Pendleton," Calloway began, pacing in front of him, "you claimed in your petition that my client was financially irresponsible and a drain on resources. Is that correct?" "Yes," Arthur said defensively. She bought expensive organic groceries. She donated to charity without asking." "I see." Calloway picked up a document. "And yet, looking at the credit card statements for the business expense account, an account you swore under oath was strictly for company use, we see some interesting charges. A diamond bracelet from Cartier, purchased 3 months ago. Did you buy that for my client?" Arthur swallowed. "No." "Did you buy it for a business partner?" "It was a networking gift," Arthur lied. "A networking gift," Calloway repeated, "for a Ms. Jessica Tate, the woman who was sitting in the gallery earlier. The woman who, I believe, is currently living in the marital home." Arthur said nothing. "And here," Calloway continued, flipping a page, "a trip to Cabo San Lucas in November. You told my client you were at a real estate conference in Denver, yet the receipts show a suite at the Four Seasons in Cabo. Occupancy, 2 adults. It was a business trip," Arthur snapped. "I was courting a client. Ms. Tate is a fitness instructor, Mr. Pendleton. Unless you were planning to build a gym on the beach, I fail to see the business connection." Laughter rippled through the courtroom. Judge Solano didn't bang the gavel to stop it. He looked amused. "Here is the reality, Arthur," Calloway said, dropping the formal titles. He leaned in close to the witness stand. "You spent $300,000 of marital funds, money that belonged to the community pot, on your mistress. Under state law, that is dissipation of assets. You have to pay that back to the estate." "Fine," Arthur yelled. "Take it out of my share of the house." "Ah, the house," Calloway smiled. "The townhouse at 42 Willow Creek Lane. A lovely property. You are asking the court to award it to you solely." "It's in my name," Arthur insisted. "I bought it before we were married." "Technically true," Calloway conceded. "You signed the deed, but who paid the down payment?" "I did. I wrote the check." Calloway turned to the jury box, which was empty, as this was a bench trial, but the theatricality worked on the audience. Mr. Pendleton wrote the check. But where did the money in his account come from? Calloway held up a bank statement. On September 14, 2020, a wire transfer of $200,000 hit your personal account. The sender was GMC Holdings. You told your broker it was an inheritance from a distant aunt. Arthur went pale. He remembered that day. Vivian had told him, "I have a little money saved up from my grandmother. I want to help you get the house." He had taken the check, patted her on the head, and never asked where a barista got 200 grand. He just assumed she had cashed out a savings bond or something. GMC, Calloway read. Genevieve Marie Claire. That was a direct transfer from her personal trust. You didn't buy that house, Mr. Pendleton. She bought it. You just put your name on the door. That was a gift, Arthur scrambled. Spouses give gifts. Not according to the prenup you forced her to sign, Calloway countered, holding up Arthur's own weapon. Clause 5, Section C. Any transfer of funds exceeding $10,000 between parties shall be considered a loan unless explicitly documented as a gift in writing. Do you have a letter from my client stating it was a gift? Arthur stared at the paper. He had insisted on that clause. He had put it there to stop her from claiming his bonuses were hers. No, Arthur whispered. Then it is a loan, Calloway declared, and with interest. You owe her the house. All of it. Judge Solano leaned forward. Mr. Pendergast, is this accurate? Does the prenuptial agreement stipulate this? Pendergast stood up, looking like a man who wanted to be anywhere else in the universe. The language is ambiguous, Your Honor. It is boilerplate, Solano snapped. It is standard exclusionary language. If the respondent provided the funds, and there is no gift letter, the petitioner owes the debt. Calloway turned back to Arthur. So, let's tally up, shall we? You owe the Harrington Beaufort Trust $12 million for the business loans. You owe the marital estate $300,000 for the dissipation of assets on your mistress. And you owe my client $200,000 plus appreciation for the house. Calloway paused, letting the numbers hang in the air. Mr. Pendleton, by my calculations, you are currently in debt to your wife to the tune of roughly $13 million. And since you listed your net worth in this affidavit as $4 million, Calloway closed the binder with a sharp snap. You are insolvent. Arthur looked at Vivian. She was studying her fingernails. Why? Arthur asked, his voice breaking. Why did you let me believe I was in charge? Why did you pretend to be weak? Vivian looked up. Her expression was unreadable. I didn't pretend to be weak, Arthur. I was just quiet. You were the one who confused silence with weakness, and I didn't let you believe you were in charge. I let you believe you were capable. I wanted to see what you would do if you had the wind at your back. I wanted to see if you would build something beautiful, or if you would just build a shrine to yourself. She stood up, walking slowly toward the witness stand. The bailiff didn't stop her. I gave you everything, she said, her voice echoing in the silent room. I gave you the capital, the home, the support. I even cleaned your laundry while you were out with Jessica. I wanted to see if you would ever, even once, say thank you. If you would ever treat me as a partner, rather than a prop. She leaned over the railing, her face inches from his. But you didn't. You took the money, and you treated me like a servant. You thought you were a king because you were standing on a mountain of gold. You never bothered to look down and realize the mountain was me. Arthur slumped back in the chair, totally destroyed. I have no further questions for this witness, Calloway said calmly. But, Your Honor, we have one more witness to call regarding the custody of the shared assets. Custody, Arthur mumbled. We don't have children. No, Calloway smiled. "But you have a dog, a golden retriever named Barnaby, and according to your filing, you intended to send him to the pound because he sheds too much." The courtroom gasped. Even the judge looked offended. "That dog," Beatrice Harrington Beaufort spoke up from the table, "is a direct descendant of the winner of Crufts 2018. He is worth more than your car, too, and he is coming home with us." Judge Solano's gavel did not just end the session. It sounded the death knell of Arthur Pendleton's carefully constructed reality. The ruling was swift, brutal, and humiliatingly public. "Mr. Pendleton," Judge Solano said, peering over his spectacles with a look of profound disappointment, "in my 20 years on the bench, I have seen many instances of hubris, but rarely have I seen a petitioner dig their own grave with such enthusiasm." The judge signed the final order with a flourish. "The prenuptial agreement is upheld. As the petitioner has no evidence of contribution to the major assets, and as the respondent has provided irrefutable proof of ownership via the Harrington Beaufort Trust, the court rules as follows. The marital home is awarded to the respondent. The business entities known as Pendleton Real Estate are to be placed in receivership pending the repayment of the outstanding loans to the trust. The vehicle, a 2024 Range Rover, is also property of the trust under the lien agreement. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises, Mr. Pendleton." Arthur sat in the chair, his ears ringing. He felt like a hollow shell. Clifford Pendergast was already packing his briefcase, refusing to make eye contact. 24 hours? Arthur stammered. "But where will I go?" Judge Solano shrugged, already reaching for the file of the next case. "That is not a concern of this court. You have a job, don't you? Although considering you owe $12 million to your ex-wife, I suggest you start picking up extra shifts." As Arthur stumbled out of the courtroom, dazed and disoriented, the hallway was a gauntlet of whispers. The reporters who had squeezed in at the back had already tweeted the outcome. Pendleton divorce was trending locally. He walked out into the rain. His umbrella was with the driver he could no longer afford, and saw a sight that stopped his heart. His Range Rover was parked at the curb, but the driver wasn't behind the wheel. A large man in a grey jumpsuit was attaching a tow hook to the bumper. "Hey!" Arthur shouted, running down the steps, slipping on the wet pavement. "Hey, that's my car!" The man looked up, unbothered. "Repo order. Issued 15 minutes ago. Bank says the lease is in default." "It can't be in default. It's on auto-pay." "The account was frozen," the man grunted, cranking the winch. The sleek black SUV, the symbol of Arthur's status, was hoisted into the air like a dead fish. Arthur stood in the rain, water soaking his bespoke suit. He reached for his phone to call Jessica. He needed a ride. He needed comfort. Pick up," he hissed. Finally she answered, but there was no sweetness in her voice. There was the sound of a zipper closing and the chaotic noise of hangers banging together. "Jessica, where are you? They took the car. Come pick me up." "I can't, Arthur," Jessica said, her voice tight. "I'm leaving." "Leaving? What do you mean?" "I saw the news, Arthur. You're broke. Worse than broke. You're in debt to her." "It's a setback. I can fix it. I just need to negotiate." "Negotiate with the Harrington Beauforts." Jessica laughed, a cruel, sharp sound. "Arthur, I Googled them. They own half of Zurich. You're done. And I'm not going to be the girlfriend of a guy who lives in a studio apartment and takes the bus. The credit card you gave me was declined at Sephora an hour ago. That was embarrassing. I don't do embarrassing." "Jessica, wait, I love you." "You loved that I looked good on your arm," she corrected. "And frankly, without the money, you're just a narcissist with a receding hairline. Goodbye, Arthur." The line went dead. Arthur stood alone on the sidewalk. The rain mixed with the tears of frustration he refused to let fall. He had no car, no home, no girlfriend, no lawyer. Across the street, a sleek, silver Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up. The back door opened, and a uniformed driver held out a large black umbrella. Vivian emerged from the courthouse, flanked by Alistair Calloway and her grandmother. She looked radiant. The mousy, hunched woman he had known was gone. In her place was a queen. She wore sunglasses, despite the rain, and a trench coat that looked like it was cut from liquid silk. She paused before getting into the car. She looked across the street, straight at Arthur. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She just watched him for a second, like a scientist observing a specimen in a jar. Then, she got into the car. The heavy door thudded shut, a sound of finality that echoed in Arthur's bones. The Rolls-Royce glided away, splashing a puddle of dirty water onto Arthur's Italian loafers. 3 weeks later, the landscape of Arthur's life had been bombed into unrecognizable rubble. He was staying in a motel off the highway, the kind of place where the neon sign buzzed all night and the sheets smelled of stale cigarette smoke. It was all he could afford with the cash he had managed to withdraw before his accounts were frozen. His business was gone. The receivership team Calloway had sent in was ruthless. They had liquidated the office furniture, the computers, even the coffee machine. They had contacted all his clients, informing them of the change in management. Most of the clients, upon hearing the name Harrington Beaufort, had happily transferred their contracts to the new ownership, eager to be associated with real money. Arthur was effectively blacklisted. In Seattle real estate, reputation is everything, and Arthur's reputation was now the fool who tried to scam a billionaire heiress. No firm would hire him. No bank would loan him a dime. He sat on the edge of the lumpy motel bed, eating a cup of instant noodles. His phone, which he kept charged only for job hunting, buzzed. It was a notification from a social media app he hadn't deleted. Event alert. The Harrington Foundation Charity Gala. Tonight at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel. Arthur stared at the screen. The Harrington Foundation. Her foundation. A twisted idea began to form in his mind. He was desperate. He was delusional. He thought that if he could just talk to her, really talk to her, without the lawyers, without the judge, he could remind her of what they once had. He could charm her. He had charmed her once, hadn't he? He could convince her that he was sorry, that he had learned his lesson. Maybe she would take him back. Or at least, maybe she would call off the debt collectors. He went to the closet. He had one suit left. It was wrinkled, and there was a stain on the lapel, but it was a suit. He shaved with a cheap disposable razor, cutting his chin. He slicked back his hair. "Showtime, Arthur," he whispered to the cracked mirror. "You can sell anything. Sell your redemption." The Fairmont Olympic was glowing with golden light. Expensive cars lined the driveway. Men in tuxedos and women in gowns that cost more than houses drifted into the lobby. Arthur didn't have a ticket, but he knew the hotel layout. He slipped in through a service entrance near the kitchens, dodging a waiter carrying a tray of champagne. He made his way to the ballroom, blending into the crowd near the back. The room was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers, massive floral arrangements of white hydrangeas, a jazz band playing softly on stage, and there, in the center of it all, was Vivian. She was wearing a gown of deep emerald green velvet, her shoulders bare, a diamond necklace glittering at her throat. She was laughing, a genuine throaty laugh he hadn't heard in years, while talking to the mayor of Seattle. She looked powerful. She looked happy. Arthur felt a surge of jealousy so potent it almost made him dizzy. That was his wife. That was the woman who used to fetch his slippers. He waited for a break in the conversation. When the mayor moved away to grab a drink, Arthur made his move. He pushed through the crowd, ignoring the glare of a security guard who clocked his shabby suit. "Vivian," he said, breathless, appearing at her elbow. She turned. Her smile didn't fade, but it froze. The temperature in her eyes dropped 10 degrees. "Arthur?" she said. She didn't sound surprised. She sounded weary. "I was wondering if you'd try something this stupid." "Vivian, please," he said, lowering his voice. "We need to talk. Alone." "I have nothing to say to you that can't be said through Mr. Calloway," she replied, turning back to the table to pick up her glass of champagne. "Don't be like that," he pleaded, reaching out to touch her arm. Before his fingers could graze her skin, a hand clamped onto his wrist. It was a hand like a vice grip. Arthur looked up. Standing next to Vivian was a man he hadn't noticed before. He was tall, with broad shoulders and eyes that were dark and dangerous. He wore a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin. "I wouldn't do that," the man said. His voice was low, a rumble of thunder. "Let go of me," Arthur snapped, trying to pull away. "I'm her husband." "Ex-husband," Vivian corrected, taking a sip of her drink. "Arthur, meet Julian. He's the head of security for the family, and he's been dying for a reason to earn his bonus." Arthur looked at Julian, then back at Vivian. "Vivian, look at me. I'm living in a motel. I have nothing. Is this what you wanted? To destroy me completely?" Vivian set her glass down. She turned to face him fully. The crowd around them had gone quiet, sensing the drama. "I didn't destroy you, Arthur," she said, her voice carrying clearly. "I just stopped propping you up. You built a life on a foundation of sand, my money, my patience, my silence. When I took those away, you collapsed. That's gravity, not malice." "I loved you," Arthur lied, desperation making his voice shrill. "We had good times. Doesn't that mean anything?" "We had times where I was convenient for you," she said. "I was your maid, your cook, your audience. I was the mirror you used to admire yourself. But you never loved me. You loved that I made you feel big. But Arthur, you were never big. You were just standing on my shoulders." She stepped closer, her perfume, something rich and spicy, not the vanilla scent he forced her to wear, filling his nose. "You want to know the truth?" she whispered, loud enough only for him to hear. "I would have stayed. If you had shown me 1 ounce of kindness when you thought I was weak. I would have given you the world. I would have made you the king you so desperately wanted to be. But you showed me cruelty. And cruelty, Arthur, is the one thing the Harrington Beauforts do not forgive." She gestured to Julian. "Get him out of here. He's ruining the ambiance." Julian tightened his grip on Arthur's arm. "Time to go, Mr. Pendleton." "No! Vivian, please!" Arthur shouted as he was dragged away. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry." The crowd parted to let them through, watching with a mixture of pity and disdain. Arthur was hauled across the marble floor, his heels skidding, his dignity left in tatters on the ballroom carpet. Julian threw him out the front door onto the pavement. The doorman looked away. "If you come near her again," Julian said, straightening his cuffs, "the police will be the least of your problems. Do you understand?" Arthur lay on the concrete, the cold seeping into his bones. He looked up at the golden light spilling from the hotel windows. He could hear the music starting up again. He could hear the laughter. He had held a winning lottery ticket in his hand for 4 years, and he had used it as a napkin. As he picked himself up, a car slowed down in front of him. It wasn't a taxi. It was a battered old sedan. The window rolled down. It was Jessica. She looked tired, her makeup smeared. "Get in," she said dully. Arthur blinked. "Jessica, you came back." "I'm not back," she snapped. "I'm heading to my sister's in Portland. I need gas money. I figured even you might have $20. Arthur laughed. It was a broken, hysterical sound. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. He had exactly $40 left to his name. He threw the wallet into the car. "Take it all," he said. "It doesn't matter anymore." Jessica took the money, looked at him for a second, with something like disgust, and drove away. Arthur stood alone in the dark. The rain began to fall again. 5 years is an eternity in the purgatory of regret. While Seattle's skyline soared, Arthur Pendleton's world had shrunk to a graying cubicle at Gary's pre-owned autos in Tacoma. At 39, he looked 50. The sharp jawline that had once charmed investors was softened by cheap beer and despair. His debt to the Harrington Beaufort Trust hung over him like a leaden sky. His bankruptcy hadn't cleared the fraud judgment, meaning every paycheck was garnished. He lived in a basement apartment and drove a rattling sedan he couldn't afford to fix. During his lunch break, Arthur indulged in a form of self-harm he couldn't stop. He opened his phone and typed, "Genevieve Harrington Beaufort." The results mocked him. Harrington Beaufort Foundation pledges $50 million to ocean conservation. And then, the photo. Genevieve, radiant in a white dress, hand in hand with Dr. Maxwell Bennett, a renowned pediatric surgeon. Bennett looked at her with a protective, gentle adoration Arthur had never been capable of. Arthur stared at the screen until it dimmed, the image triggering a memory from 2 years ago, the last time he had seen her. He had been working stock at a high-end shoe store in downtown Seattle. He was on his knees, organizing boxes, when he saw the cane. He looked up to find Beatrice Harrington Beaufort looming over him. "Mr. Pendleton," she said, her voice dry. "I saw you through the window. It seemed poetic." Arthur scrambled up, dusting off his pants. "I'm working hard. I'm paying off the debt." "The money is a rounding error to us," Beatrice said, dismissing him with a wave of her gloved hand. "We enforced it to teach you value. You thought you were the sun, Arthur. You never realized that Vivian was the gravity holding your entire universe together." The door chimed. Genevieve walked in, shaking rain from her umbrella, laughing at something outside. She stopped when she saw him. There was no anger in her eyes. There was only the mild confusion one might feel when seeing a stranger who looks vaguely familiar. "Oh," she said softly. "Hello, Arthur." She didn't ask how he was. She turned to her grandmother. "Ready to go? Maxwell has a table at the pink door." "Vivian, wait," Arthur blurted out, desperation clawing at his throat. Do you hate me?" Genevieve paused, her hand on the door. She looked back at him, and the emptiness in her gaze destroyed him more than any lawsuit could have. It wasn't hate. It was total indifference. "I don't think about you at all, Arthur," she said. And then she left. Back in the break room of the used car lot, the memory stung worse than the garnishment. He had spent years trying to impress her, then destroy her, and now mourning her. To her, he was just a footnote. "Pendleton!" his manager shouted from the lot. "Customer on line 2. Move it!" Arthur buttoned his cheap polyester jacket. "I'm coming," he whispered. He walked out into the grey, persistent rain to sell cars he didn't own, for a paycheck that wasn't his. He was finally, truly, a self-made man. He had built this hell, brick by brick, with his own arrogance. And somewhere in Zurich, under the glow of a chandelier, Genevieve was laughing, completely unaware he even existed. This story serves as a chilling reminder that in relationships, the quietest person in the room is often the most powerful. Arthur Pendleton made the fatal mistake of confusing silence with submission and kindness with weakness. He believed that his value came from his status, his money, and his control, never realizing that the true wealth in his life was the woman standing right beside him. When the tables turned, it wasn't just a legal victory for Genevieve, it was a restoration of balance. She didn't destroy Arthur, she simply removed the support she had been providing and let gravity do the rest. It is a lesson for all of us. Never take a loyal partner for granted, and never assume that just because someone is humble, they are powerless. Sometimes, the hand that rocks the cradle or signs the prenup rules the world. If you enjoyed this story of dramatic justice and the ultimate karma, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share this video with a friend who needs a reminder that the truth always comes out in the end. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Thanks for listening.